In the winter of 1888, a sanitary inspector for the London County Council recorded the temperature inside a milk dealer's cart at 38 degrees Fahrenheit at 4 o'clock in the morning. By 9, the same vessel registered 61 degrees. The milk, he noted, had soured in transit. This is not the version of Victorian milk delivery you have seen in pastoral illustrations with cheerful farmers and gleaming copper pails. That is the ratio this system produced. 10 miles of labour for 1 gallon of delivered product. The first thing you need to understand about the milk cart is that it was never intended to preserve freshness. It was intended to move volume. The frame was ash or elm, selected for flex rather than durability. The wheels were iron-rimmed, not for traction but because wood alone wore through in 6 weeks of London cobblestones. Each cart weighed, empty, approximately 180 pounds, loaded with 4 standard churns, each holding 17 gallons of milk, each weighing 142 pounds when full. The total burden exceeded 1,200 pounds. The assumption built into every commission was that the cart would be replaced before the horse. But 1880s London had almost no reliable method of road maintenance. Potholes were not exceptions, they were the surface. To understand what that meant, you need to picture what these churns actually were. They were not copper. Copper was for display, for the shop counter where customers watched their measure poured. The transport vessels were deal wood, staved and hooped with iron bands, sealed with a paste of flour and water that softened in damp conditions. Wood absorbs. The London atmosphere offered almost nothing worth absorbing except coal smoke, horse urine, and the organic particulate of a city of 4 million people. The interior of a churn, after 3 uses, carried a film that no amount of scalding water could fully remove. The film carried bacteria. The bacteria carried souring. You arrive at the depot at 3:45 a.m. The time is not arbitrary. It is calculated from the distance to the dairy farms on the urban margin, Islington, Hackney, Battersea, and the average walking pace of a draft horse pulling a loaded cart over mixed surfaces. You do not drive, you walk beside the horse. The reins are looped over your shoulder. Your left hand rests on the cart's side rail. Your right hand holds a lantern. The light does not illuminate the road ahead so much as it marks your position for other carts in the pre-dawn queue. The queue forms at the depot gate. The gate opens at 3:50, not before. The depot keeper holds a pocket watch. He checks it against the church bell. The bell is sometimes slow, the watch is not. You step forward when your number is called. The number is painted on your cart's side panel in white lead. The paint flakes. You do not repaint it. Repainting is the dealer's responsibility, and the dealer repaints only when the number becomes illegible to the municipal inspector. Illegibility means a fine. The fine is 2 shillings and 6pence. 2 shillings and 6pence is the price of 3 gallons of milk at wholesale. You cannot afford the fine, you keep the number visible. The churns are loaded by 2 men using a wooden ramp and a rope sling. The sling is hemp. Hemp rots when wet. The ramp is greased with tallow to reduce friction. Tallow attracts rats. You do not look at the rats. You watch the churn as it is winched onto the cart bed. The bed has 4 recessed sockets, each lined with straw. The straw is changed weekly. The straw absorbs spillage. Spillage is milk. Milk is money. A single gallon lost to leakage represents 12 minutes of walking at the standard delivery pace. You calculate the loss in time, not in constancy. Time is the metric that governs your day. The iron bands on the churns are cold. You grip one to steady it during loading. The cold transfers through your glove. Your glove is wool. Wool retains moisture. Your hand is already damp from the previous churn. The combination of cold iron and damp wool produces a sensation that is not quite pain, but registers as a persistent signal in your nervous system. You do not name the sensation. You adjust your grip. The horse is hitched. The harness is leather. Leather stiffens in cold weather. The buckles require force to fasten. Your fingers are not nimble at this hour. You use your teeth to pull the strap through the keeper. The leather tastes of oil and old sweat. You do not think about where the sweat came from. The horse stands still. It has been trained to stand still. Training involved repetition and occasional correction with a whip. The whip is not used now. The horse knows the routine. You know the routine. The routine is the structure that makes the system function. You check the lantern oil. It is colza oil pressed from rapeseed. It burns with a yellow flame that produces smoke. The smoke stains the glass chimney. The chimney is cleaned every third day. Cleaning requires removal, scrubbing with vinegar, and drying. You do not clean it today. Today is a delivery day. Cleaning days are scheduled for Thursdays unless Thursday is a market day, in which case cleaning is deferred to Friday morning. The schedule is posted in the depot office. You do not read the schedule, you remember it. Memory is the tool that replaces paperwork for men in your position. The cart moves forward when the horse moves forward. You do not command the horse, you walk. The horse follows the path it has walked before. The path avoids the worst cobblestones. The path is not the shortest route. The path is the one that minimizes jolting. Jolting spills milk. You have already calculated the cost of spillage in time. You do not need to recalculate it. The calculation is embedded in your gait. Your steps are short. Your knees are slightly bent. Your body absorbs the shock that the cart's suspension. There is no suspension, cannot. The air is cold. Cold air carries sound differently than warm air. The iron rims on the wheels produce a ringing note on stone. The note is high and thin. It carries ahead of you. Other carters hear it. They adjust their positions. The pre-dawn streets are not empty. They contain other milk carts, bread vans, newspaper boys, and the occasional night watchman completing his round. The watchman carries a rattle. The rattle produces a sound that is meant to signal authority. The sound is lost in the chorus of iron on stone. Authority at this hour is exercised by the man who controls the horse. You reach the first collection point at 4:22 a.m. The time is noted in your ledger. The ledger is a small book, bound in oilcloth, carried in a pocket sewn into the inside of your coat. The pocket is positioned over your heart. The book is protected from moisture. Moisture ruins paper. Paper is the record. The record is what the dealer uses to calculate your wage. Your wage is piecework. You are paid per gallon delivered, not per mile walked. The distinction matters. Miles are fixed. Gallons can be lost. You do not lose gallons. The dairy farmer hands you a chalk slate. The slate records the volume collected, 68 gallons. The number is written in chalk. Chalk smudges. You do not smudge it. You copy the number into your ledger using a pencil with a nub of graphite no longer than a fingernail. The pencil is sharpened with a knife. The knife is carried in a sheath on your belt. The sheath is leather. Leather stiffens in cold weather. You do not think about the leather. You 68 gallons. 68 gallons at 142 pounds per 17-gallon churn equals 568 pounds of milk, plus the weight of the churn, plus the weight of the cart, plus the weight of the horse, plus your own weight. The total is a figure you do not calculate consciously. Your body calculates it with every step. You secure the slate to the cart's side rail with a leather thong. The thong is knotted. The knot is a specific type, a clove hitch. The clove hitch holds under tension but can be released with one pull. You learned the knot from the man who trained you. The man is no longer in this work. His hands gave out. The knot remains. The knot is part of the system. The churns are sealed with wooden bungs. The bungs are taped. They fit into tapered holes. The fit is not airtight. Air carries contaminants. The contaminants are not visible. They become visible when the milk sours. Souring is a chemical process. The process is accelerated by temperature fluctuation. The temperature fluctuates. You cannot control the temperature. You can only control the pace. The pace is set by the horse. The horse is set by the routine. The routine is the system. You move to the next collection point. The time allocated is 18 minutes. You arrive at 4:41 a.m. The farmer is not ready. You wait. Waiting is part of the routine. Waiting costs time. Time is the metric. You do not express frustration. Frustration does not change the metric. The farmer arrives at 4:43. He apologizes. You do not accept or reject the apology. You note the time in your ledger. The note is a record. The record is what matters. The chalk slate is updated. 134 gallons total. You copy the number. Your pencil leaves a grey mark on the oilcloth page. The mark is permanent. Permanent records are required by the dealer. The dealer is required by the municipal inspector. The inspector requires records to verify volume for tax purposes. The tax is levied per gallon sold. The gallon is the unit of account. The unit of account is not the unit of labour. The unit of labour is the step. You have taken approximately 400 steps since leaving the depot. Each step moves one thing 200 pounds, a distance of 2.5 feet. The work is measured in foot-pounds. You do not measure it, you perform it. The lantern flame flickers. The flicker is caused by a draft. The draft comes from the alley between two buildings. The buildings are brick. Brick retains cold. The cold radiates. Your coated is wool insulation is not perfect. Your skin temperature drops. Your body responds by shivering. Shivering consumes energy. Energy comes from food. You have not eaten since the previous evening. The next meal is scheduled for 10 a.m. The schedule is fixed. You do not deviate from the schedule. Deviation risks delay. Delay risks spoilage. Spoilage risks loss. Loss risks wage reduction. Wage reduction risks hunger. Error risks dismissal. Dismissal risks destitution. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk. The cart turns onto a wider street. The cobblestones are larger here. The iron rims produce a different note. The note is lower. The lower note carries farther. You hear other carts responding. The pre-dawn chorus is a form of coordination. Coordination prevents collision. Collision damages goods. Damaged goods represent loss. You avoid collision, you maintain position, you follow the horse. The horse follows the path. The path is the system. Which brings you to the body inside the wool coat, and the body is where the real problem begins. The cart's side rail demands a grip, which means your fingers remain in a state of semi-flexion for hours at a time. Muscles held in static contraction consume oxygen without producing movement. Oxygen consumption produces heat. Heat produces sweat. Sweat in contact with wool for 4 hours absorbs body salts completely. The salts crystallize. The crystals abrade the skin. The abrasion is not a wound. It is a persistent irritation that registers as a low-level signal in your nervous system. You do not name the signal. You adjust your grip. The combination of inadequate food, restricted breathing, prolonged standing, cold drafts meeting body heat, and sustained anxiety produces predictable physiological results. Your breath condenses in the pre-dawn air. The condensation freezes on your scarf. The frozen moisture adds weight to the fabric. The added weight pulls on your neck muscles. Your neck muscles are already engaged in stabilizing your head against the cart's motion. Stabilization requires micro-adjustments. Micro-adjustments consume energy. Energy comes from glycogen stores. Glycogen stores deplete after approximately 90 minutes of continuous moderate exertion. You pass the 90-minute mark at 5:15 a.m. You do not check a watch. Your body checks for you. The signal is a slight tremor in your quadriceps. The tremor is not visible to an observer. It is detectable only to you. You compensate by shortening your stride. The horse's body operates under similar constraints. The draft horse selected for milk cart work is not a show animal. It is a Grade Shire or Clydesdale cross, valued for steady temperament rather than speed. The horse weighs approximately 1,600 pounds. The loaded cart weighs 1 to 200 pounds. The ratio of pull to body weight is 0.75. This ratio is sustainable for a trained animal over mixed terrain for periods not exceeding 4 hours. Your route is 10 miles. 10 miles at an average pace of 2.8 miles per hour requires approximately 3.6 hours of continuous pulling. The calculation is marginal. The margin is absorbed by the horse's training. Training involved gradual conditioning over 18 months. The conditioning is not reversible. The horse pulls because it has been conditioned to pull. You walk because you have been conditioned to walk. The conditioning is the system. The horse's breath condenses in the cold air. The condensation is more voluminous than yours because the horse's lung capacity is larger. The vapor rises and dissipates. The dissipation carries heat away from the horse's body. Heat loss requires metabolic compensation. Compensation consumes feed. Oats cost money. Hay costs money. The dealer calculates feed costs per mile. The calculation determines the horse's ration. The ration is fixed. You do not adjust the ration. Adjustment risks the horse's performance. Performance risks the delivery schedule. The schedule is the metric. Your shoulders bear the weight of the reins. The reins are leather. Leather transmits vibration. The vibration comes from the iron-rimmed wheels on cobblestones. The vibration travels up your arm to your shoulder joint. The shoulder joint is a ball and socket. Repetitive vibration causes microtrauma to the cartilage. Microtrauma accumulates. Accumulation produces inflammation. Inflammation produces stiffness. Stiffness reduces range of motion. Reduced range of motion requires compensatory movement from adjacent joints. The compensation pattern is not conscious. It is embedded in your neuromuscular system. You do not think about the pattern. You walk. The temperature inside the churns rises as the morning progresses. The rise is not linear. It follows the ambient temperature curve with a lag of approximately 40 minutes. At 4 a.m., the milk temperature is 38 degrees Fahrenheit. At 6 a.m., it is 44 degrees. At 8 a.m., it is 53 degrees. The chemical processes that cause souring accelerate exponentially with temperature. The acceleration factor is approximately 2.3 per 10 degree Fahrenheit increase. By 9 a.m., when the ambient temperature reaches 61 degrees, the milk in the outer layer of the churn has begun to culture. The culturing is not visible. It is detectable only by taste or by laboratory analysis. You do not taste the milk. You do not have access to laboratory analysis. You rely on the schedule. The schedule is designed to deliver the milk before the culturing becomes organoleptically apparent. The design is imperfect. Imperfection is built into the system. Preservation methods available to the Victorian milk dealer are limited. Ice is expensive. Ice requires storage. Storage requires infrastructure. Infrastructure requires capital. Capital is not allocated to milk preservation. Capital is allocated to volume expansion. The assumption is that speed of delivery substitutes for temperature control. The assumption is incorrect. The incorrectness is documented in sanitary inspector reports. The reports are filed. The filing is the system's response to documented failure. You do not read the reports. You follow the schedule. Your hands are exposed to the air. The air carries particulate matter. The particulate matter includes coal soot, horse dander, and organic debris from street cleaning. The debris settles on your skin. Your skin traps particulate. The combination forms a film. The film is not removed during the work period. Removal requires water. Water is not available during the route. Water is available at the depot. The depot is not on the route, is fixed. You do not deviate from the route. Deviation risks delay. Delay risks spoilage. Spoilage risks loss. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk. The horse's hooves strike the cobblestones at a rate of approximately 80 strikes per minute. Each strike produces a shock wave. The shock wave travels through the harness to your shoulder. The cumulative effect of 80 strikes per minute for 3.6 hours is 17,280 discrete impacts. The impacts are absorbed by your skeletal system. Absorption produces microfractures in bone. Microfractures heal during rest. Rest is scheduled for the afternoon. The schedule is fixed. You do not deviate from the schedule. Deviation risks recovery time. Recovery time risks performance. Performance risks employment. Employment risks subsistence. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk. Your breath pattern adjusts to the exertion. The adjustment is autonomic. Autonomic regulation maintains blood pH within narrow limits. The limits are 7.35 to 6.45. Deviation outside these limits produces physiological distress. Distress reduces performance. Performance is the metric. You do not monitor your blood pH. Your body monitors it for you. The monitoring is the system. The milk in the churn sloshes with the cart's motion. The sloshing produces a rhythmic sound. The sound is a low-frequency wave. The wave resonates with the cart's wooden frame. The resonance produces a hum. The hum is constant. Constant sound at low frequency produces a sensation of pressure in the inner ear. The pressure is not pain. It is a persistent signal. The signal is embedded in your auditory processing. You do not name the signal. You walk. The combination of cold air, wool insulation, body heat production, and sweat evaporation produces a microclimate inside your coat. The microclimate has a temperature gradient. The gradient ranges from 98.6 degrees at your skin surface to 42 degrees at the coat's exterior. The gradient drives heat transfer. Heat transfer consumes energy. Energy consumption requires fuel. Fuel is food. Food is scheduled. The scheduled from the schedule. Deviation risks energy deficit. Energy deficit risks performance. Performance risks employment. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk. The horse's eyes are covered with blinkers. The blinkers restrict peripheral vision. Restricted vision reduces startle responses. Startle responses waste energy. Energy is calculated per mile. The calculation is fixed. You do not adjust the calculation. Adjustment risks the horse's behavior. Behavior risks the delivery schedule. The schedule is the metric. Your feet are inside leather boots. The boots are waterproofed with tallow. Tallow softens leather. Softened leather stretches. Stretched leather loses support. Support is required for prolonged standing. Prolonged standing is the condition of your work. The work is fixed. You do not change the work. Change risks adaptation time. Adaptation time risks performance. Performance risks employment. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk. The milk's chemical composition changes with temperature. The change is measurable. The measurement requires equipment. The equipment is not available on the cart. The cart is designed for transport, not analysis. Analysis is performed at the depot. The depot is not on the route. The route is fixed. Deviation risks delay. Delay risks spoilage. Spoilage risks loss. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk. The pre-dawn light increases gradually. The increase follows a predictable curve. The curve is determined by latitude and season. The determination is astronomical. Astronomy is not your concern. Your concern is the light level. The light level affects visibility. Visibility affects safety. Safety affects performance. Performance is the metric. Your body has now been in motion for 2 hours and 17 minutes. The physiological markers are consistent with sustained moderate exertion. Elevated heart rate, increased respiratory rate, mild dehydration, glycogen depletion in type I muscle fibers. The markers are not pathological, they are expected. Expectation is built into the system's design. The design assumes a replacement workforce. Replacement is available. Availability is the system's contingency. You do not think about replacement, you walk. The churn's wooden staves expand slightly with temperature increase. The expansion is measurable, the measurement is not performed. Performance is not required. Requirement is determined by regulation. Regulation is documented. Documentation is filed. Filing is the system's response to potential failure. You do not read the documentation. You follow the schedule. The horse's sweat evaporates from its flanks. Evaporation produces cooling. Cooling requires metabolic compensation. Compensation consumes feed. Feed is calculate. Calculation is fixed. You do not adjust the calculation. Adjustment risks the horse's condition. Condition risks performance. Performance risks the delivery schedule. The schedule is the metric. You have now walked approximately 4.2 miles. The distance is measured by your steps. Your steps are consistent. Consistency is trained. Training is the system. You do not think about the system, you walk. The Metropolitan Board of Works had an opinion about volume. In 1875, the Adulteration of Food and Drink Act specified that all measures used in the sale of milk shall conform to the imperial standard gallon of 277.274 cubic inches. The phrasing imperial standard was not decorative. It meant exactly what it said. Any deviation exceeding 1 fluid ounce per gallon subjected the dealer to a penalty of £5. £5 was the wholesale value of approximately 40 gallons of milk. 40 gallons represented 3 hours of delivery labour. The bureaucratic machinery of municipal inspection extended, in other words, all the way down to the question of a single fluid ounce. You carry a measuring tin. The tin is brass, stamped with the verification mark of the Weights and Measures Inspectorate. The mark is a crown over the letters WM. The stamp is applied after the tin has been tested against the master standard kept at the Guildhall. Testing occurs every 18 months. The 18-month interval is not arbitrary. It corresponds to the expected wear rate of brass under daily use. Wear produces variance. Variance produces legal liability. You do not calculate the variance. You use the tin as issued. The tin is the system. The measuring ritual is fixed. The customer presents a vessel. The vessel is rarely standardized. A tin pail, a glass bottle repurposed from gin. The vessel's capacity is irrelevant. You fill it using the brass tin. 1 dip, 1 pour. The pour must be complete. Residual milk left in the tin represents loss. Loss is calculated per gallon. You do not leave residual milk. The technique requires a specific wrist motion, a quick inversion followed by a sharp upward flick. The flick dislodges the final drops. The drops fall into the customer's vessel. The motion is practiced. Practice produces consistency. Consistency is required by the dealer. The dealer is required by the inspector. The inspector is required by the act. The act is the system. You record each transaction in your ledger. The ledger entry contains 4 fields: time, location, volume, customer identifier. The customer identifier is not a name, it is a chalk mark system. Each regular customer is assigned a symbol: a circle, a cross, a triangle, a dot within a square. The symbols are recorded in a master ledger kept at the depot. The master ledger is cross-referenced with the rate card. The rate card specifies price per gallon by district. District boundaries follow parish lines. Parish lines are historical. History is not your concern. Your concern is the symbol. The symbol determines the entry. The entry determines your wage. Your wage is piecework. Piecework requires documentation. Documentation is the system. The chalk slate you carry is updated after each delivery. The update is subtraction. 134 gallons at departure. 133 gallons at the first delivery. 132.5 after the second. The half-gallon notation is permitted. The permission is documented in the dealer's handbook. The handbook is issued by the Milk Dealers Association. The association negotiates with municipal authorities on behalf of its members. Negotiation produces compromise. Compromise produces the half-gallon allowance. The allowance is not generosity. It is recognition of measurement variance. Variance is inherent in the system. You do not think about variance. You subtract. Municipal inspectors conduct random checks. The checks are not announced. Announcement would defeat the purpose. The purpose is verification. Verification requires observation. Observation occurs at the point of sale. The inspector approaches during a transaction. The approach is not confrontational. Confrontation risks disturbance. Distraction risks error. Error risks the inspection's validity. The inspector watches. You complete the transaction. The inspector requests to see your measuring tin. You present the tin. The inspector examines the verification mark. The mark must be legible. Legibility is your responsibility. You clean the mark weekly. Cleaning requires a cloth and a small amount of vinegar. Vinegar is carried in a vial attached to your belt. The vial is glass. Glass breaks. You do not break the vial. Breaking represents loss. Loss is calculated. You do not think about the calculation. You present the tin. The inspector may request a sample. The sample is taken using a sterile ladle. Sterility is achieved by boiling. Boiling requires equipment. Equipment is carried by the inspector. The inspector's equipment is standardized. Standardization is required by the Act. The Act is the system. The sample is placed in a sealed vial. The vial is labeled with time, location, and dealer identification. The identification is your number. Your number is painted on your cart. The paint flakes. You keep the number visible. Visibility is your responsibility. Responsibility is enforced by penalty. Penalty is £5. £5 is 40 gallons. 40 gallons is 3 hours of labour. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You present the tin. The Adulteration Act of 1875 contained a specific provision regarding milk. Section 6 stated, "No person shall sell, to the prejudice of the purchaser, any article of food or any drug which is not of the nature, substance, and quality of the article demanded by such purchaser." The phrase "to the prejudice of the purchaser" was subject to legal interpretation. Interpretation occurred in magistrate courts. Courts required evidence. Evidence required analysis. Analysis required laboratories. Laboratories were scarce. Scarcity produced delay. Delay produced uncertainty. Uncertainty favored the dealer. The dealer was a member of the association. The association provided legal support. Support was conditional on compliance. Documentation was the system. You do not adulterate the milk. Adulteration involves adding water, chalk, or borax. Water dilutes volume. Chalk masks dilution. Borax delays souring. Each additive has a cost. The cost is calculated per gallon. The calculation is performed by dealers who operate outside the association. Association membership requires adherence to purity standards. Purity standards are documented. Documentation is filed. Filing is the system's response to potential fraud. You are not a dealer, you are a carter. Your wage depends on volume delivered, not volume sold. The distinction matters. Delivered volume is recorded. Sold volume is recorded. Discrepancy triggers investigation. Investigation requires documentation. Documentation is the system. The chalk slate you carry is your legal record. The slate is wood. Wood warps with moisture. Warping affects legibility. Legibility is required for inspection. You protect the slate with an oilcloth cover. The cover is attached with brass snaps. Brass tarnishes. Tarnish does not affect function. Function is your responsibility. Responsibility is enforced by penalty. Penalty is wage deduction. Deduction is calculated per incident. Incident is defined as failure to produce legible record upon demand. Demand is at inspector's discretion. Discretion is power. Power is the system. You reach a checkpoint at 7:15 a.m. The checkpoint is not marked. You recognize it by the presence of a uniformed officer. The uniform is dark blue with brass buttons. The buttons bear the municipal seal. The seal is a lion rampant. The lion is not relevant. The officer is. The officer requests your ledger. You present the ledger. The officer examines the entries. The entries must be in chronological order. Chronology is verified by timestamps. Timestamps are recorded in pencil. Pencil can be erased. Erasure is detectable. Detection requires magnification. Magnification is carried by the officer. The officer uses a pocket lens. The lens is glass. Glass requires cleaning. Cleaning is the officer's responsibility. You do not think about the lens. You wait. The officer compares your ledger entries with the chalk slate. The numbers must match. Matching requires accuracy. Accuracy is your responsibility. Responsibility is enforced by penalty. Penalty is £5. £5 is 40 gallons. 40 gallons is 3 hours of labour. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You wait. The officer signs your ledger. The signature is a verification. Verification permits continuation. Continuation is the objective. The objective is delivery. Delivery is the metric. The metric is the system. The regulatory framework extends beyond volume. Temperature is not regulated. Temperature affects quality. Quality affects customer satisfaction. Satisfaction affects repeat business. Business affects dealer revenue. Revenue affects a piecework. Piecework requires volume. Volume requires speed. Speed risks temperature increase. Temperature increase risks souring. Souring risks complaint. Complaint triggers inspection. Inspection requires documentation is the system. You have now delivered 47 gallons. The number is recorded. The record is permanent. Permanence is required by law. Law is the system. You do not think about the system. You walk. The brass measuring tin develops a patina with use. Patina is oxidation. Oxidation does not affect volume. Volume is verified periodically. Verification is the inspector's responsibility. Responsibility is defined by statute. Statute is the system. You use the tin as issued. Issuance is the system. The chalk symbols you assign to customers are not arbitrary. They follow a coded system. The code is known only to you and the dealer. Power is the system. You do not share the code. Sharing risks fraud. Fraud risks penalty. Penalty is £5. £5 is 40 gallons. 40 gallons is 3 hours of labour. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You subtract. The ledger you carry is oilcloth bound. Oilcloth resists moisture. Moisture ruins paper. Paper is the record. The record is what the dealer uses to calculate your wage. Your wage is piecework. Piecework requires documentation. Documentation is the system. You protect the ledger. Protection is your responsibility. Responsibility is enforced by penalty. Penalty is wage deduction. Deduction is calculated per incident. Incident is defined as to produce legible record upon demand. Demand is at inspector's discretion. Discretion is power. Power is the system. You reach the midpoint of your route at 8:03 a.m. The time is noted. The note is a record. The record is permanent. Permanence is required by law. Law is the system. You do not think about the system. You walk. The first thing you need to understand about the delivery is that it is not a transaction. It is a procedure. The procedure begins when the horse stops. You do not command the stop. The horse knows the house. The house has been marked on your route map in pencil. The mark is a cross. The cross means regular delivery. You approach the rear gate. The gate is iron. Iron is cold. You rest the lantern against the brickwork. The lantern's flame casts a long shadow across the pavement. The pavement is uneven. Uneven pavement increases the risk of spillage during pouring. Spillage is loss. Loss is calculated. You do not think about the calculation. You position the cart. You retrieve the brass measuring tin. The tin is heavy. Brass has a density of 3 or 7 pounds per cubic inch. A full gallon of milk weighs 8.6 pounds. The tin itself outweighs 2.4 pounds. Your arm lifts the combined weight. The lift is repetitive. Repetition produces micro-trauma in the rotator cuff. The trauma accumulates. You do not treat the trauma. You compensate with wrist alignment. Alignment is trained. Training is the system. You dip the tin into the churn. The bung is removed. The sound of the wooden stopper pulling free is a dull pop. Air enters the vessel. The milk surface ripples. The ripple travels to the edges. You lower the tin. The brass rim meets the liquid. You submerge it fully. Partial submersion introduces air pockets. Air pockets affect volume accuracy. Accuracy is required. You pull the tin upward. The motion is vertical. Vertical lifting engages the trapezius. The trapezius fatigues after approximately 40 repetitions. You have performed 12 so far. You continue. You pour the milk into the customer's vessel. The vessel is ceramic. Ceramic is brittle. Brittleness requires controlled descent of the liquid stream. You tilt the brass tin at a 45-degree angle. The milk flows. The flow produces a sound. The sound is a steady rush. The rush changes pitch as the vessel fills. You listen to the pitch. The pitch drops when the vessel nears capacity. You stop the flow by snapping the tin upright. The final drops cling to the brass rim. You execute the wrist flick. The drops fall. The volume is exact. The customer watches from the doorway. The customer's presence is not conversational. It is observational. Observation is part of the transaction's accountability. You do not speak. Speaking wastes breath. Breath is fuel. You mark the chalk slate. 1 cross. The slate records the completion. Completion triggers the next address. The address is 140 yards down the street. 140 yards is 420 steps at your standard stride. You calculate the distance automatically. Calculation is embedded. Embedding is the system. You lead the horse forward. The pace is 2.8 miles per hour. The pace covers 140 yards in approximately 54 seconds. You arrive at 8:17 a.m. You park. You repeat the procedure. Dip, pour, flick, mark. The sequence takes exactly 2 minutes and 15 seconds when performed without interruption. Interruption is rare. The street is quiet at this hour. The quiet is broken only by iron rims on stone, horse hooves, and the sound of pouring milk. The sounds are predictable. Predictability reduces cognitive load. Load reduction preserves energy. Energy is required for the remaining mile. The repetitive strain manifests in specific muscle groups. The forearm flexors tighten from sustained gripping of the measuring tin. The grip strength required to lift a full gallon tin repeatedly is approximately 12 pounds of sustained force. Over a 3-hour delivery window, this force is applied roughly 180 times. The cumulative load is 2,160 pounds of force. The tendons adapt through collagen remodeling. Remodeling takes time. Time is not allocated during the route. The route is fixed. You walk. The pain is not acute. It is a low-grade stiffness that registers as resistance to full extension. You do not acknowledge the resistance. You adjust your grip. The adjustment is the system. Customer tallying protocols require absolute precision. The chalk marks are not decorative. They are an accounting ledger. Each symbol corresponds to a billing cycle. The cycle runs weekly. Weekly reconciliation occurs at the depot. Reconciliation requires matching your slate entries to the customer master list. Mismatches produce discrepancies. Discrepancies trigger wage holds. Holds are administrative holds. The hold lasts until the discrepancy is resolved. Resolution requires manual verification. Verification takes time. Time costs money. You do not create discrepancies. You mark accurately. Accuracy is trained. Training is the system. The street-level waiting periods are dictated by customer availability. If the door remains closed, you wait. The wait is measured in minutes. 3 minutes maximum. If the door does not open after 3 minutes, you mark the slate with a dot and proceed. The dot indicates missed delivery. Missed deliveries are logged. Logs are reviewed by the depot manager. The manager contacts the customer by messenger. The messenger delivers a note. The note requests the empty vessel for the next day. The system accommodates absence. Accommodation requires documentation. Documentation is permanent. You wait exactly 3 minutes. You count the seconds using your pulse. Your pulse is elevated from exertion. The counting is approximate. Approximation is sufficient. Sufficient is the standard. You encounter a broken pavement slab. The slab protrudes 1 inch above the surrounding stones. The protrusion catches the cart's iron rim. The catch produces a jolt. The jolt transfers to the churn. The churns shift. Shifting creates sloshing. Sloshing spills milk. You brace your left shoulder against the cart rail. The impact travels through your scapula. The scapula absorbs the force. Absorption produces bruising. Bruising does not affect function. Function is delivery. You continue. The cart clears the obstruction. The wheels settle. The rhythm resumes. The rhythm is the system. The brass measuring tin develops a fine layer of dried milk on its exterior. The layer is calcium and protein residue. Residue builds with each pour. You wipe it with a linen cloth between deliveries. The cloth is carried in a pocket. The pocket is positioned at your hip. Access requires one hand. One hand is occupied with the reins. You transfer the reins to your teeth temporarily. The leather strap rests against your molars. The taste is oil and sweat. You wipe the tin. You return the reins to your hand. The transfer takes 4 seconds. 4 seconds is deducted from the waiting buffer. The buffer is finite. You manage the buffer. Management is the system. Public observation increases as the morning progresses. Shopkeepers open their doors. Clerks arrive for work. The milk cart becomes part of the urban soundscape. The cart is not silent. It produces noise. The noise is the sound of commerce. Commerce is visible. Visibility attracts scrutiny. Scrutiny requires compliance. Compliance is documented. You do not react to observation. You maintain the pace. Pace is the metric. The metric is fixed. The chalk slate fills. The slate is 12 inches by 18 inches. It holds 36 marks before requiring erasure. Erasure is performed at the midpoint rest stop. The rest stop is not designated for rest. It is designated for slate maintenance. You use a damp rag to clear the surface. The rag is reused. Reuse introduces residue. Residue causes smearing. Smearing obscures marks. Marks must remain legible. You apply pressure evenly. Pressure removes the chalk without damaging the wood. The wood is pine. Pine is soft. Softness requires controlled pressure. Control is train. Training is the system. You reach a narrow alley. The alley is 6 feet wide. The cart requires 5.5 feet of clearance. The clearance is marginal. You guide the horse by applying gentle pressure to the reins. The horse understands. Understanding is built through repetition. Repetition is the foundation of the route. The foundation is load-bearing. Load-bearing structures require maintenance. Maintenance is deferred to the afternoon. The afternoon is your responsibility. Responsibility is the system. You navigate the alley. The wheels scrape the brick walls. The scraping produces a high-pitched scrape. The scrape echoes. The echo indicates proximity. Proximity is monitored visually and auditorily. Monitoring is continuous. Continuity is required. Requirement is the system. The repetitive strain shifts to the lower back. The lower back stabilizes the torso during walking. Stabilization engages the erector spinae. The muscles contract isometrically. Isometric contraction reduces blood flow. Reduced blood flow causes lactic acid accumulation. Accumulation produces fatigue. Fatigue reduces posture. Posture affects lifting mechanics. Lifting mechanics affect volume accuracy. Volume accuracy affects wages. Wages affect subsistence. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk, you complete the 70-second delivery at 9:14 a.m. The time is noted. The note marks the transition to the final quadrant. The final quadrant contains larger households. Larger households require larger vessels. Larger vessels require more frequent dipping. Dipping increases arm workload. Workload increases fatigue. Fatigue is expected. Expectation is built into the route's design. The design assumes a trained operator. You are the operator. Operation is the system. The brass tin is now warm from ambient temperature and handling. Warm metal conducts heat. Heat transfers to your palm. Palm temperature rises. Rising temperature sweat. Sweat reduces grip friction. Reduced friction increases slippage risk. Slippage risks spillage. Spillage risks loss. Loss is calculated. You apply rosin powder to the tin handle. Rosin increases friction. Grip security restores control. Control is the system. You mark the slate. The chalk leaves a white line on the dark wood. The line is straight. Straight lines require steady pressure. Steady pressure requires stable joints. Stable joints require rest. Rest is not scheduled until the route concludes. Conclusion is at 10 a.m. Conclusion is fixed. You do not deviate. Deviation risks the schedule. The metric is the system. You have now walked 6.8 miles. The remaining distance is 3.2 miles. The ratio is 2:1. The ratio is consistent with route optimization models. Optimization minimizes idle time. Idle time reduces throughput. Throughput determines revenue. The operation is the system. You walk. The horse walks. The wheels turn. The iron rings against stone. The sound carries. The city wakes. The delivery continues. The economic machinery behind the daily quota operates on margins calculated to the quarter-t. The dealer purchases milk from the farm at 3.2 pence per gallon. The dealer sells to the customer at 5 pence per gallon. The difference, 3 pence, covers cart maintenance, horse feed, your wage, municipal fees, association dues and profit. Your wage is 0.4 pence per gallon delivered. For a standard route of 134 gallons, you earn 53.6 pence, or 4 shillings and 5.6 pence. This sum must cover your lodging, food, clothing and any personal contingencies. The calculation is not generous. Generosity is not a variable in the equation. The equation is fixed. You do not adjust the equation. Adjustment risks the dealer's margin. Margin risks the operation's viability. Viability risks employment. Employment risks subsistence. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk. The rural infrastructure that sustains the trade is distributed across a radius of 12 miles from the urban centre. Farms are not independent operators. They are nodes in a collection network. The network is coordinated by the dealer. Coordination requires scheduling. Scheduling requires communication. Communication to boys who cycle between depot and farm. The boys are paid per message delivered. Delivery requires its speed. Speed risks accident. Accidents risk delay. Delay risks spoilage. Spoilage risks loss. Loss is calculated. You do not think about the calculation. You follow the schedule, refers to the secondary market for milk byproducts. Whey, skim milk, and spoiled product are sold to pig farmers at 0.8 pence per gallon. The sale is not optional. It is a recovery mechanism. Recovery reduces net loss. Loss reduction preserves margin. Margin preservation sustains the operation. The operation is the system. You do not participate in the swill transaction. Participation requires authorization. Authorization is documented. Documentation is filed. Filing is the system's response to potential diversion. You deliver fresh milk. Fresh milk is the primary commodity. The commodity is the metric. The metric is due return to the depot at 10:07 a.m. The time is noted by the depot keeper. The keeper holds a pocket watch. The watch is synchronized with the church bell. The bell is sometimes slow, the watch is not. Lateness exceeding 5 minutes triggers a wage deduction. Deduction is 0.1 pence per minute. 5 minutes costs 0.5 pence, 0. 5 pence represents the value of 1/8 of a gallon. 1/8 of a gallon represents 3 minutes of walking. The calculation is embedded. You do not calculate. You arrive on time. Punctuality is trained. Training is the system. You unhitch the horse. The harness is removed using a specific sequence. Breastplate first, then traces, then bridle. The sequence prevents tangling. Tangling requires time to resolve. Time costs money. You follow the sequence. Sequence is documented in the depot manual. The manual is available for consultation. Consultation is not required for trained operators. You are trained. Training is the system. You hang the harness on its designated peg. The peg is numbered. The number corresponds to your cart. Correspondence prevents misallocation. Misallocation causes delay. Delay risks the next route. The next route begins at 2 p.m. for afternoon deliveries. The schedule is fixed. You do not deviate. Deviation risks the system. Cleaning involves scalding water, a stiff brush and a solution of soda ash. The solution cuts fat residue. Fat residue harbors bacteria. Bacteria cause souring. Souring causes loss. Loss is calculated. You scrub the interior of each churn. The scrubbing motion is circular. Circular motion engages the shoulder joint. The joint is already fatigued from the morning route. Fatigue reduces efficiency as the metric. You maintain the rhythm. Training is the system. You record the final tally in your ledger. The tally is subtraction from the starting volume. 134 gallons at departure. 131.5 gallons delivered. 2.5 gallons accounted for as spillage, evaporation, and swill recovery. The discrepancy is within acceptable limits. Acceptable limits are defined by the dealer's handbook. The handbook is issued by the Milk Dealers Association. The association negotiates standards. Standards are documented. Documentation is filed. Filing is the system's response to variance. You sign the ledger. The signature is verification. Verification permits wage calculation. Calculation occurs weekly. Weekly payment is the standard. Standard is fixed. You do not think about the standard, you wait. You receive your wage envelope. The envelope contains coin. Coin is counted in your presence. Counting is witnessed by the depot keeper. Witnessing prevents dispute. Dispute consumes time. Time costs money. You count the coin. The count matches the ledger. Matching permits closure. Closure is the objective. The objective is subsistence. Subsistence is the metric. The metric is fixed. The physical toll of the route is not recorded. Recording requires medical examination. Examination costs money. Money is not allocated to worker health. Allocation is determined by return on investment. Investment in health produces no immediate return. Return is the metric. You do not expect examination. Expectation is not part of the system. You walk home. The walk is 1.2 miles. The distance is not compensated. Compensation is for labor, not transit. Transit is your responsibility. Responsibility is the system. The churns remember the milk. The wood absorbs organic compounds. The compounds accumulate with each use. Accumulation produces a characteristic odor. The odor is not unpleasant to those accustomed to it. Acquaintance is the system. You do not notice the odor. Notice is not required. Requirement is function. Function is delivery. Delivery is the metric is fixed. The horse is led to the stable. The stable is ventilated. Ventilation reduces ammonia buildup. Ammonia irritates respiratory tissue. Irritation reduces performance. Performance is the metric. You do not think about your tasks. Tasks are defined. Definition is the system. You leave the depot at 10:43 a.m. The time is not recorded. Recording is not required for departure. Requirement is arrival. Arrival is documented. Documentation is permanent. Permanence is the system. You have now completed one cycle of the milk cart route. The cycle will repeat tomorrow. Repetition is the foundation of the system. Foundation is load-bearing. Load-bearing structures require maintenance. Maintenance is your responsibility. Responsibility is enforced by penalty. Penalty is wage deduction. Deduction is calculated per incident. Incident is defined as failure to perform assigned task. Assignment is at dealer's discretion. Discretion is power. Power is the system. You do not think about the system, you walk. The urban margin expands as the city grows. Expansion requires additional routes. Carts require additional horses. Horses require additional feed. Feed requires additional capital. Capital is allocated based on projected return. Projection is uncertain. Uncertainty favors conservative investment. Investment determines expansion. Expansion determines opportunity. Opportunity determines employment. Employment determines subsistence. The chain is logical. You do not think about the chain. You walk. The milk cart route is not romantic. Romance is not a variable in the equation. The equation is fixed. You do not adjust the equation. Adjustment risks the system. The system is the structure that makes delivery possible. Possibility is the objective. The objective is fixed. You walk. The churn remembered everything. 10 miles of cobblestone vibration, of iron rims ringing against stone, of breath condensing in pre-dawn cold, of shoulders bearing the weight of rains and routine. 1 gallon delivered at a time, measured in brass, recorded in chalk, tallied in pencil on oilcloth pages that absorbed the moisture of your hands and the smoke of the city. The system called it commerce. The ledger called it volume. The body called it endurance. The churn remembered the milk. The wood absorbed the labor. The iron bands held the weight of a city's morning ritual that no photograph ever captured. If you want to know what happened to the milk after it left your cart, if you want to trace the path from brass tin to breakfast table, if you want to understand the next link in the chain that connected rural farm to urban household, the next route begins at the depot gate at 3:50 a.m. The horse is already hitched. The lantern is already lit. The schedule is fixed.